Ernest F. Hollings, the governor of South Carolina. Governor Hollings.
Chairman, Mayor Bates, Senator Johnson, Senator Smathers, and other distinguished guests, my friends of South Carolina. It's wonderful to welcome the first Democratic presidential candidate ever to campaign in South Carolina, and to welcome home also an alumnus of the University of South Carolina. In January of this year, Jack Kennedy made known his candidacy for the president. And immediately over the land rose cries of doubt and disregard. Many said, too young, forgetting that Japanese patrols in South Pacific waters bring maturity beyond age. He's a Catholic, others warned, not knowing of his 14-year record of public service in support of separation of church and state was stronger than that of the Supreme Court. He's rich, and the poor won't vote for him. He supports the working man, and the rich won't vote for him. He's from the industrial East and can't get the Midwest farm vote. He will be opposed by all the political kingmakers. Harry is for Stew, Ellen is for Adderley, and the Speaker is for Lyndon. And so it was. He fought vigorously against labor corruption, and the labor bosses was opposed him. Even the hopefuls, Catholic hopefuls for vice president, will hold their states back, like Wagner of New York and Brown of California, and others like Bob Minor will hold their states from him for geographical reasons. Yes, the ADA and the NAACP were for Humphrey in Wisconsin and West Virginia, and the liberals were for Wayne Morse in Oregon. But in 7 primaries and through 35 states, Senator John Kennedy carried his record, his resolve directly to the people. Obstacles, hurdles, impossibilities, he faced them as a profile in courage, and stands victorious today here before us as our party's presidential nominee because, in the words of one of his opponents, Senator Stuart Symington, Senator Kennedy worked harder, he was wiser and more courageous than the rest of us. I am sure that never before have the people of America had the opportunity of a closer, more intimate look at their candidate, his accomplishments, his philosophy, yes, his dedication to the future of this country. More and more every day, they like what they see and hear. More and more they are convinced that our lethargic times demand his leadership in the presidency. He is inspiring, he is dedicated. His true greatness lies in his concern for all of America, for all its people. No one controls Senator Kennedy, yet everyone influences him. He's responsible to all, but obligated to none. Truly, a great leader for a great nation. I am most pleased to present your next president, Senator John F. Kennedy.
Governor Hollings, Senator Johnson, ladies and gentlemen, I am grateful for the generous introduction of an old friend of my brother's and mine of many years, your distinguished and vigorous Governor Fritz Hollings. I'm grateful to him for his invitation to be here today. And I appreciate the presence on this platform of my friend and colleague in the United States Senate, Senator Olin Johnson, with whom I've served for many years. I am glad to be in a state which cast its votes for me at the Democratic Convention in 1956 for Vice President. I'm glad to be in a city, the home of the University of South Carolina, which honored me in 1957. And I'm glad to be the first Democratic candidate in the history of South Carolina to come to this state and ask your help. What did the Republicans ever do for South Carolina? Actually, I'm here to pay tribute to a great South Carolinian whose feats are known to every American, the New York Yankees, Bobby Richardson. Apparently, he is one Yankee that has your blessings, and I'm here to gain them too. Actually, baseball and politics are different. The other day, the Boston Red Sox, Ted Williams retired. They said he was too old at 42. Perhaps experience doesn't count. I want to express my regrets for being late, and more than I can say. They told me 5 days ago a storm was coming up here, so we waited. But we think there is a storm coming up here in next November 8th that's going to sweep Mr. Nixon all the way back to California. Actually, I was not playing golf in Georgia. I was at Warm Springs. I was at Warm Springs visiting a home of a great Democratic president, Franklin D. Roosevelt. For 8 years in the United States Senate, I have occupied a seat which was once held in the Senate from Massachusetts by a distinguished senator, Senator Daniel Webster. He served in the time before 1850, when the Senate was at its height, and included within its ranks Lewis Douglas, Cass, Benton, and all the rest. But none of these were considered by Daniel Webster to match the talents and the character of the senator from South Carolina, John C. Calhoun. They were both born in the same year. Calhoun was a native of Abbeville, South Carolina. They both went to college in New England, one to Yale and the other to Dartmouth. They had both entered Congress as young men, and they stayed in Congress for 40 years until they died in 1850, John Calhoun, and in 1852, Senator Daniel Webster. They worked together on foreign relations, the development of the United States, fiscal improvements. Each served in the House as well as the Senate. Each was Secretary of State. And yet, through most of their life, they also differed on great questions. But to his dying day, Senator Daniel Webster said of John C. Calhoun, he was much the ablest man I ever knew. He could have demolished Newton, Calvin, or Locke as a logician. He admired, above all, his powerful mind and his courage. And sitting as I do in the United States Senate, succeeding Senator Webster in succession, I have also admired John C. Calhoun. And when I was selected as chairman of a committee to pick 5 outstanding senators in the history of this country, John C. Calhoun's name led all the rest. And his painting is now in the Senate reception room. And when I wrote a book about courageous senators, I mentioned John C. Calhoun. I'm not here in South Carolina to make glittering promises or glowing predictions, but to express the hope that in 1960, South Carolina and the nation will be guided by the spirit of Calhoun and his courage. I never know what South Carolina thinks of a measure, he once said. I act to the best of my judgment and according to my conscience. If she approves, well and good. If she does not, and wishes anyone to take my place, I am ready to vacate. We are even. He demonstrated this in 1816 when he voted to raise the pay of congressmen from $6 a day to the munificent sum of $1,500 a year. Congressman after congressman was defeated. And yet John C. Calhoun, speaking in the House, spoke words that I invoke today. This House is at liberty to decide on this question according to the dictates of its best judgment. Are we bound in all cases to do what is popular? Have the people of this country snatched the power of deliberation from this body? If we act in opposition to conscience and reason, how are political errors, once prevalent, ever to be corrected? That is the spirit of the Democratic Party. That is the spirit of Thomas Jefferson and Woodrow Wilson and Franklin Roosevelt and Harry Truman. Are we bound in all cases to do what is popular? In 1960, the people of the United States have a very clear choice to make between Mr. Nixon and myself. We see America in different terms, and we see the future in entirely different terms. He runs on a slogan, "You've never had it so good." I run on the slogan, "This is a great country that must be greater." I think we can do better. We must say, as John Calhoun said, that we must appeal to conscience and reason, and not merely to what is popular. Mr. Nixon has taken a different course, for he does not belong, as I do, to the party of Calhoun. He belongs to the party of Herbert Hoover, who promised a chicken for every pot. He belongs to the party that kept cool with Coolidge, that returned to normalcy with Harding, that tried to repeal Social Security with Landon, that ran Dewey. We never did that. Mr. Nixon is true to the traditions of this party. Popularity, not logic, is his standard. He promises a vast new program of aid to education. He promises in the last 2 weeks a great, vast housing program. And he promises to outdo the Democrats in agriculture, public works, reclamation, foreign aid, defense, and all the rest. But then he journeys south, and he talks to you, and he comes out against federal bureaucracy. He comes out against spending. He comes out against the Democratic Party because we support these programs. I believe the American people and the people of South Carolina and the South and the North should be dealt with more frankly. I believe that the American people are wise enough to know that these promises are either election year oratory or they will require funds and effort by the federal government. I am just as opposed as Mr. Nixon to unbalanced budget and to federal deficits. The largest deficit in the history of this country was in 1958, $12 billion. I do not believe that Washington should be the center of all action. We do not know as much about your problems as you do. There's no magic in tax money that comes to Washington and then is spent by us. But I must say that I believe, not in big government for big government's sake, but I believe in effective government. And I believe there is a responsibility for the national government. The farmers of this state who grow cotton, they cannot protect themselves without a national policy. The textile workers of this state who are working in some cases 2, 3, or 4 days, they cannot protect themselves against imports that may destroy them without national action. We cannot develop the Tennessee Valley without the people working together. There is a place for action on every level. And those who say that they are against action, I believe, are against the United States moving ahead in the 1960s. And instead of talking out of both sides of our mouth, I think every candidate should take his stand with Lyndon Johnson of Texas, who said he talks not as a Texan, not as a Southerner, not as a white man, but as an American in a united country. And I speak in that spirit today. The test of popularity, rather than Calhoun's test of conscience, has also been applied by my opponent in the sensitive area of civil rights. He makes a great show of discussing this subject when he comes south, but it's hardly the same speech he delivered in New York City last week. Up north, he talks about legislation. Down here, he emphasizes that laws alone are not enough. Up there, he stresses how quickly he will act in all these areas. Down here, he says, quote, I know this is a difficult problem. Up there, he criticizes the Democratic Party for having nominated a Southerner on the ticket. Down here, he omits the civil rights plank in his own platform. I don't think Mr. Nixon is fooling anyone, north or south. I think it's clear that if we are to have progress in this area, and we must have progress to be true to our ideals and responsibilities, then presidential leadership is necessary so that every American can enjoy his full constitutional rights. Some of you may disagree with that view, but at least I've not changed that view in an election year or according to where I'm standing. I don't send Senator Hugh Scott of Pennsylvania to campaign for me in the north and Senator Barry Goldwater to come south and say we don't mean any of it. All these are important issues. But I must say what is most important is that the United States recognized in the 1960s that these are difficult and dangerous times, that it's going to require the best of all of us, whether we live in Massachusetts or whether we live in South Carolina. I do not go to the American people, and it is upon your shoulders that the great decision will rest, promising that if I'm elected, life will be easy. I think to be a citizen of the United States in the 1960s is going to be a burdensome and hazardous occupation. But I have the greatest confidence in this country. I have the greatest confidence in our system of government. I know we can meet our responsibilities. And I do not agree with those who say that we downgrade the United States when we downgrade Republican leadership. I'm not satisfied. I'm not satisfied in our most dangerous years to have our steel mills working 50%, to have 35% of our brightest boys and girls never get to college, to be turning out half as many doctors and nurses as we now need, to find the largest agricultural surplus, $9 billion, stored away rotting, while more than 5 million of Americans go to bed every night on a substandard diet of 5 cents a day of surplus food. I'm not satisfied to see the United States stand still, to see farmers' income driven down and given only for relief. The same promises of Mr. Benson applied with new lighting and new makeup. These are dangerous days, but it is upon us that the hope of freedom lies. It is upon the United States. It is upon our vitality and our vigor and our willingness to embrace the future. I come as the candidate of the oldest political party on earth, in direct succession from Thomas Jefferson, in direct succession and standing where Woodrow Wilson and Franklin Roosevelt and Truman stood in this century, and saying that we also in our day have a rendezvous with destiny. Our generation of Americans must meet its responsibility, not only to ourselves, but to all those who wish to trod in freedom's road. I want Mr. Khrushchev to know that a new generation of Americans has taken over in this country. Men who fought in Italy and the South Pacific in order to maintain this country's freedom. Men who have the greatest confidence in our country. Men who want to see it move again. Men who want to see it go ahead again. And I come to South Carolina and ask your help in this campaign. I ask you to join us in building a stronger America, an America which will serve as an example to a watching world as we sit on a most conspicuous stage. We will give leadership if we're successful, and I can promise you this country will start moving again. Thank you.